Okay, hello everyone. We're starting momentarily. Hopefully the audio is and video are working okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So somebody's sound is a bit weird. Okay, I don't know what that means. When you say weird, a bit static. I don't know I'm not sure how to correct that. We'll just keep going with it. Okay, so we're dealing with the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. And we've gotten to the beginning of the fifth chapter. So I think today will be the conclusion. If you're not so messing with that sound, somebody just adjusted the mic. Checking the connections. It seems to be okay. Connection seems to be okay. Placement. Okay, is that any better? I moved the mic. Is it better or worse or same? Okay, so I think we'll just go with what we got. Okay, thank you for your input. There's not much we can do about it then. Okay, so getting back to this sutta. The Lord said, Ananda, let us cross the Hiranyawati river and go to the Mala Sal Grove in the vicinity of Kusinara. Very good, Lord, said Ananda, and the Lord with a large company of monks crossed the river and went to the Sal Grove. There the Lord said, Ananda, prepare me a bed between these twin sal trees, with my head to the north. I am tired and I want to lie down. Very good, Lord, said Ananda, and he did so. And the Lord lay down on his right side in the lion posture, placing one foot upon the other, mindful and clearly aware. So this is where the Buddha is lying down to pass away, to enter Parinibbana. He's not going to get up from this again. Lying down between sal trees near Kusinara. It's noteworthy that all the major incidents of the Buddha's life, his birth, his enlightenment, his first teaching, and his Parinibbana, all occur outdoors, under trees. And those twin sal trees burst forth into abundance of untimely blossoms. That is, meaning they came into flower or blossom out of season. Which fell upon the Tathagata's body, sprinkling it and covering it with homage. Divine coral tree flowers fell from the sky. Divine sandalwood powder fell from the sky, sprinkling and covering the Tathagata's body in homage. Deva music and song sounded from the sky in homage to the Tathagata. So this is blossoms from the Parichataka tree in Tawatingsa, the heaven on the top of Mount Sinaru. There's a tree under which Saka sits that has these divinely beautiful large blossoms. That's one of the glories of Tawatingsa. And at the time of the Buddha's passing, the earth around Kusinara was showered with these dewa blossoms, as well as divine music and song. The Lord said, Ananda, these sal trees have burst forth into an abundance of untimely blossoms. Divine music and song sound from the sky. Never before has the Tathagata been so honored, revered, worshipped, and adored. And yet, Ananda, whatever monk, nun, male or female lay follower dwells practicing the Dhamma properly and perfectly, fulfills the Dhamma way, and honors the Tathagata, reveres and esteems him, and pays him supreme homage. Therefore, Ananda, we will dwell practicing the Dhamma properly and properly fulfill the Dhamma way. This must be your watchword. So this is very characteristic of the Buddha. His teaching is always intended to be practical and to lead beings out of samsara into liberation. And he's saying all this glorious rain of flowers and music and so forth from heaven. It's very fine, that honors the Tathagata, but if you really want to honor the Tathagata, follow the Dhamma, live according to Dhamma. That would be the highest praise, is to follow his teaching. Just then the Venerable Upavana was standing in front of the Lord, fanning him, and the Lord told him to move. Move aside, monk, do not stand in front of me. And the Venerable Ananda thought, this Venerable Upavana has long been the Lord's attendant, keeping close at hand at his beck and call. And now in his last hour, the Lord tells him to stand aside. Why ever does he do that? And he asked the Lord about this. And the Lord said, Ananda, the Devas from 10 world spheres have gathered to see the Tathagata for a distance of 12 yojanas around Mala's Sal Grove. There is not a space you could touch with the point of a hair that is not filled with mighty Devas. And they are grumbling, we have come a long way to see the Tathagata. It is rare for a Tathagata, a fully enlightened Buddha, to arise in the world. And tonight, in the last watch, the Tathagata will attain final Nibbana. And this mighty monk is standing in front of the Lord, preventing us from getting a last glimpse of the Tathagata. So Devas from other world systems even are coming, crowding around for a distance of 12 yojanas. That they're packed with. And of course, the Buddha can see them with his Buddha Chaku, his psychic powers, but the ordinary humans are unaware of it. So when these incidents in the chief incidents in the Buddha's life, particularly these 4, his birth, his enlightenment, his first sermon, and his parinibbana, are events of cosmic significance. And this is indicated by the presence of devas flocking around at these times to be witness. Ananda asks, what kind of devas can the Lord perceive? Ananda, there are sky devas whose minds are earthbound. They are weeping and tearing their hair, raising their arms, throwing themselves down, twisting and turning, crying, all too soon the Blessed One is passing away. All too soon the welfare, the Sugato, is passing away. All too soon the eye of the world is disappearing. And there are earth devas whose minds are earthbound who do likewise. But those devas who are free from craving endure patiently, saying, all compounded things are impermanent. What is the use of this? So there are some devas who have stages of awakening. It's said that there are no deva worlds that where there are not some stream winners. But it's also said that it's not possible for a deva to attain to arahantship and remain in the deva form. They will immediately pass away and be reborn elsewhere. So we can assume that these devas who are taking the Lord's passing with equanimity are stream winners or once returners. Lord, formerly monks who had spent their reigns in various places used to come to see the Tathagata and pay their respects, but with the Lord's passing, we will not have a chance to do this. So Ananda is asking him how should people honor the Tathagata after his death? Ananda, there are 4 places, the sight of which should arouse emotion. In the Pali, there is samvega, which means something a little bit more specific than arouse emotion. It's like arouse a spiritual enthusiasm or awe. And what are these 4 places? Where the Tathagata was born, that is Lumbini, where he attained supreme enlightenment, the Bodhgaya, where he turned the wheel of the Dhamma, that's Sawati, and the deer park near Sawati, and the last is where he attained the Nibbana element without remainder, Kusinara. So these are the 4 sites of pilgrimage down to the present day that Buddhists travel to India to make this pilgrimage will visit those 4 sites. And it's said here that one who dies while making pilgrimage to these shrines with a devout heart will, at the breaking up of the body, be reborn into a heaven world. And Ananda asks him, Lord, how should we act towards women? Do not see them, Ananda. But if we do see them, how should we behave? Do not speak to them, Ananda. But if they speak to us, Lord, how should we behave? Practice mindfulness, Ananda. So he's this has to be taken in some degree of context because Ananda is the friend of women. He was the one who advocated for the establishment of the Bhikkhuni order and became almost the patron saint of Bhikkhunis in later life. And there's some indication he was a bit of a sensualist by nature, and that was what he was struggling against to make his enlightenment. So the Buddha was telling him to be very, very cautious around women. Then it goes on, what should we do with the Tathagata's remains? Do not worry yourself about the funeral arrangements. Strive for the highest goal. Leave it to the, I'm abbreviating a bit, but leave it to the lay people, the Kachas, Brahmins, and householders. They will take care of the funeral. But Ananda presses him, well, what should we do with the Tathagata's remains? And the Buddha says they should be dealt with the same way as a Chakravarti, a wheel-turning monarch. And there's a long paragraph describing how the body should be wrapped in hundreds of layers of cloth and put in a vat of oil and then cremated. He says there are 4 persons worthy of such a stupa: Tathagata, a Pachika Buddha, a disciple of the Tathagata, and a wheel-turning monarch. And why is this? Because if one of these stupas is seen, people's hearts are made peaceful. And then the breaking up of the body, they'll go to a good destiny and arrive in heavenly world. Then after this conversation, the Venerable Ananda went to his lodging and stood lamenting, leaning on the doorpost. Alas, I am still a learner with much to do. I am a learner is a seka. Excuse me just a second here. There's somebody wanting my attention at this end. Okay, so Ananda says, I'm still a learner with much to do. A learner is a seka, which means he's a stream winner. He's not finished the path, but he's begun. He's made the first step on the passage of awakening. So he's classed as a seka. Ananda will attain arahantship prior to the convening of the first council. That's a very important episode that's beyond the scope of this particular sutta. But at this time, he's lamenting because the Lord is passing away before he's attained full enlightenment. Then the Lord inquired of the monks where Ananda had gone, and a certain monk told him, and he said, "Go and say this to Ananda. Friend Ananda, the teacher summons you." Very good. Ananda replied to that monk, and he went to the Lord, saluted him, and sat down to one side. And the Lord said, "Enough, Ananda. Do not weep and wail. Have I not already told you that all things that are pleasurable and delightful are changeable, subject to separation and becoming other? So how could it be, Ananda, since whatever is born, become, compounded, subject to decay, how could it be that it should not pass away? For a long time, Ananda, you have been in the Lord's presence, showing loving kindness in acts of body, speech, and mind, beneficially, blessedly, wholeheartedly, unstintingly. You have achieved much merit, Ananda. Make the effort in a short time, you will be free of the corruptions." So Ananda has been the Buddha's chief attendant for the last 20 years of his life and has served the Buddha devotedly. So he's made an enormous amount of merit, and he will, prior to in just a few months, prior to the convening of the first council, he will finish the work and become an arahant. The Buddha is telling him not to despair. And then the Lord addressed the monks. Monks, all those who are arahant, fully enlightened Buddhas in the past, have had just such a chief attendant as Ananda, and so too will those blessed lords who come in the future. Monks, Ananda is wise. He knows when it is the right time for monks to come and see the Tathagata, when it is the right time for nuns, for male and female lay followers, for kings, for ministers, for leaders of other schools, and for their pupils. Ananda has 4 remarkable and wonderful qualities. What are they? If a company of monks comes to see Ananda, they are pleased at the sight of him. And when Ananda talks Dhamma to them, they are pleased. And when he is silent, they are disappointed. and so too with nuns, and with male lay followers, and with female lay followers. And these same qualities apply to a wheel turning monarch. If he is visited by a company of kachas, or brahmins, or householders, or ascetics, they are pleased at the sight of him. So he's praising Ananda. Uh, in very high praise, telling him not to despair. Now, this is very a poignant moment. It's a touching moment between the Buddha and Ananda, who was his cousin and the same age as him. He was also 80 years old at the time. And Venerable Ananda said, "Lord, may the blessed Lord not pass away in this miserable little town of wattle and daub, right in the jungle in the back of beyond. Lord, there are great cities such as Kampa, Rajagaha, Sawati, Sakata, Kosambi, Varanasi. In those places there are wealthy Brahmins, kachas, householders who are devoted to the Tathagata, and they will provide for the Tathagata's funeral in proper style." So the Buddha had chosen for the place of his passing this obscure little town out in the boonies, and Ananda is saying, "Why don't you go to one of the big metropolises, and then they'll honor you properly after your death?" And the Buddha says, "Don't call it a miserable little town of wattle and daub, right in the jungle in the back of beyond. And once upon a time, Ananda, King Mahasudasana, who is a previous birth of the Buddha, by the way, King Mahasudasana was a wheel-turning monarch, a rightful and righteous king, who had conquered the land in 4 directions and assured the security of his realm, who possessed the 7 treasures. And Ananda, this King Mahasudasana, had this very Kusinara under the name of Kusawati as his capital. And it was 12 yojanas long from east to west, and 7 yojanas wide from north to south. Kusawati was rich, prosperous, and well populated, crowded with people and well stocked with food, just as the Dewa city of Alakamanda, that's on the northern continent, the capital of Kuwara, or Wesawana. Alakamanda, rich, prosperous, well populated, crowded with yakas and well stocked with food. So was his royal city of Kusawati. And in the city of Kusawati was never free of 10 sounds by day or night: the sound of elephants, horses, carriages, kettle drums, side drums, lutes, singing, cymbals, gongs, and cries of "eat, drink, and be merry." So in one sense, this is another expression of impermanence. There are other few places in the suttas where the Buddha will point to some particular geographical location and say how in the distant past it was quite different. That a small hill used to be a great mountain, or in this case, a small town used to be a great capital city. And now Ananda, go to Kusinara and announce to the Malas, tonight in the last watch, the Tathagata will attain the final Nibbana. Tell them that they should approach the Tathagata before he passes away, lest they regret it later. Very good, Lord. So the Malas are found in their meeting hall, and Ananda makes the announcement, and they weep and wail and are upset. But then they come to see the Tathagata, and then Ananda then uses his skill at managing these situations, and he thinks to himself, if I allow them to honor the Buddha one by one, it'll take all night, and he'll pass away before they're finished. So he has them come up by family groups, and they pay homage to him and go on their way. And then there's the incident of the wanderer Subhada, who was the last person to receive Dhamma teachings directly from the Buddha. He arrived in Kusinara and he heard the Buddha was passing away, and he says he had some doubts and confusions, and he asked if the Buddha could dispel his doubts. And Ananda first tries to get rid of him. He says, the Tathagata is weary and tired, and he's passing away. He doesn't have time for this. But the Buddha hears him, and he says, enough. Let him come. He would not be asking a question frivolously. For whatever Subhadda asks me, he will ask in quest of enlightenment. So he gets permission to speak to the Buddha, and he asks the Buddha about other teachers like Purana, Kassapa, Makala Gosala, and this the standard list of other non-Buddhist teachers. And he says, have all of these realized the truth as they claim, or have some of them realized it, or have some realized it and some not? And the Buddha basically sees that as an irrelevant question. He says, enough, Subhadda, never mind whether all or none or some have realized the truth. I will teach you Dhamma, Subhadda. Listen and pay close attention. Yes, Lord. In whatever Dhamma and discipline, Dhamma Vinaya, the Noble Eightfold Path is not found, no ascetic is found of the first, second, third, or fourth grade, meaning no stream winner, Sakadagami, Anagami, or Arhat. But such ascetics can be found of the first, second, third, fourth grade in a Dhamma Vinaya where the Noble Eightfold Path is found. Now, Subhadda, in this Dhamma and discipline, the Noble Eightfold Path is found, and in it are to be found ascetics of first, second, third, fourth grade. These other schools are devoid of true ascetics, but if in this one the monks were to live the life to perfection, the world would not lack for arahants. So this is an important passage that's often quoted for answering the question of whether it's possible for people to be enlightened outside of Buddhism. And the Buddha's own words on this was, if they have the full Eightfold Path, and that would include Samaditi, right view. So anyone who does not have right view cannot attain to stages of enlightenment. And also the last statement, as long as there are monks living the life in perfection, the world will not lack for arahants. And this is often taken to mean that as long as the Vinaya is observed, there will be arahants in the world. It's a sign that the Dhamma has the gates of Dhamma have not closed, which they will eventually. There'll be a dark period between Buddhas when no one is getting enlightened. But the traditional interpretation of this passage is that as long as there are monks living according to Vinaya, there will be some arahants in the world. Then Subhadda said, "Excellent Lord, it is as if someone were to set up what has been knocked down, or to point out the way to one who has been lost, or brought an oil lamp into a dark place." This is a standard statement by someone who's been converted by the Buddha. It occurs many, many times in the suttas, just exactly these words. And then he goes to refuge to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. May I receive the going forth in the Buddha's presence. May I receive ordination. So this is the very last person to take refuge in the presence of the Buddha. And the Buddha then tells him that the ordinary rule is that if someone this Subhadda was a wanderer, meaning he was an ascetic in some other tradition. He said if someone wants to ordain coming from another tradition, they must wait for 4 months on probation. And Subhadda says, I'm willing to wait even 4 years, but the Buddha says we can make an exception based on the person, an exemption based on the person, and we can ordain this man right away. And it goes on to say that in no short time, he lived in seclusion, and in no short time he attained to arahantship. So this Subhadda was the last direct disciple of the Buddha, we could say. And then the Lord said to Ananda, and we're now into the 5th recitation section. The Lord said to Ananda, if it may be, you will think the Lord's instruction has ceased. Now we have no teacher. It should not be seen like this. What I have taught and explained to you, the Dhamma and discipline, will now be your teacher. And then he lays out a few last sort of housekeeping points, before he passes away, some tidying up of some points of etiquette. He said, up to now, the monks are in the habit of addressing each other as awuso, which is translated here as friend. It's the more informal greeting. This custom is to be abrogated after my passing. Senior monks shall address more junior monks by their name, their clan, or as awuso, whereas more junior monks are to address their seniors as Bante or Ayasama. Yeah. So that's still practiced today, that monks of similar ordination seniority, and the standard differs from place to place, but generally it's monks within 3 years ordination of each other. They can call each other awuso, or seniors refer to juniors as awuso. But juniors are to refer to seniors as Bante, although that's the Pali. Although in practice, in Thai tradition, it's more common to use the title Ajahn, which would be similar to Ayasama. But the idea is that there's, whatever the cultural nuances in different places are, the idea is that seniority is to be respected, and senior people are to be given a more respectful title. And then the Buddha says, if they wish, the order may abolish the lesser and minor rules after my passing. And this comes up again in the first council, because this is one of the debates of the first council, was what were the lesser and minor rules. And Ananda was chastised for not asking the Buddha to clarify the definition of lesser and minor rules. So after some debate, they decided they're not going to risk it. We'll just keep all of the rules as they're laid down by the Buddha. We won't abolish anything. And then the Buddha addresses a particular case of the monk Channa, who is to receive the Brahmadanda, the Brahma penalty. What is the Brahmadanda? Whatever the monk Channa wants or says, he is not to be spoken to, admonished, or instructed by the other monks. So he's kind of ostracized. And this is considered to be the most supreme penalty in the Vinaya, the Brahmadanda, very rarely applied. And the monk Channa, who later reformed, but he had become very arrogant. He was the Buddha. He had been the Bodhisattva's chariot driver before the Bodhisattva's going forth. And so he was one of the first individuals to be a follower of the Buddha. And later he, after he became a monk, he became arrogant. He would tell others, oh, I've known the Buddha since he was just a kid. I'm one of his close buddies. You better, listen to me. And so now he was given this silent treatment as a punishment. So after these, all of these are basically sort of housekeeping notes, the Buddha then asked the assembled monks, this is your last chance, monks. If you have any questions or uncertainties or doubts about the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, about path or practice, ask now. Do not afterwards feel remorse, thinking the teacher was there before us and we failed to ask the Lord face to face. But the monks were silent, and the Buddha repeated his words a second and a third time. Perhaps, monks, you do not ask out of respect for the teacher. Then, monks, let one friend tell it to another, but still they were silent. And Ananda said, It is wonderful, Lord, it is marvelous. I clearly perceive that in this assembly there is not one monk who has doubts or uncertainty. And the Buddha said, You, Ananda, speak from faith, but the Tathagata knows in this assembly there is not one monk who has doubts or uncertainty about Buddha Dhamma Sangha. The very least one of these 500 monks is a stream winner, incapable of falling into states of woe, certain of nibbana. And then the Buddha speaks his last words. Now, monks, I declare to you, all conditioned things are of a nature to decay. Strive on untiringly. That's Maurice Walsh's translation. And he does, in this edition, he quotes the Pali. Vayadhamma Sankara, Apamadena Sampadeta. Apamadena Sampadeta. And this has been translated in different ways by other translators. Work out your salvation with diligence, accomplish earnestly, and so on. So these are the last words of the Buddha. A statement of conditionality and impermanence, followed by admonition to strive on, to continue to make an effort. And then the Buddha goes through a number of meditation states prior to final passing. He enters first jhana, then second, third, fourth jhana. Then he goes through the formless jhanas: infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, neither perception nor non-perception, and then the cessation of feeling and perception. That's Nirodha Samapatti. And then the Venerable Ananda said to the Venerable Anuruddha, the Lord has passed away. And then Anuruddha replied, no, he has not. He has entered the cessation of feeling and perception. Nirodha Sampati is sometimes listed as the 9th jhana, and it's a state beyond even the formless jhanas, and it's really only accessible to anagamis and arahants. And it's said that one in Nirodha Sampati, from the outside, it's impossible or very difficult to determine whether they're alive or dead. They appear as if dead. All kind of biological signs cease. But then the Buddha left the attainment of cessation of perception, of feeling and perception, Nirodha Sampati, and he went through in reverse order, went through the formless jhanas and the jhanas of form down to first jhana. And then he went up again, second, third, fourth jhana, and leaving fourth jhana, he finally passed away. So the reason we can, this is recorded and known, is because Anuruddha had he had the gift of the divine eye, the Dibbachaku, to a very high degree. He was the Buddha's foremost disciples in divine vision. So he could, using his psychic powers, he could track the state of mind of the Buddha. And he reported on this. As we see, he told Ananda, no, the Lord has not passed away yet. And then the Lord went down in reverse order through the jhanas, then up again to fourth jhana, then leaving fourth jhana, he entered Parinibbana. So now the Buddha has passed away. At the Lord's final passing, there was a great earthquake. Again, these events are marked by powerful signs, terrible and hair-raising, accompanied by thunder. And Brahma Sahampati uttered this verse. And Brahma Sahampati was the Brahma, the Mahabrahma, who at the time of the Buddha's enlightenment, when the Buddha was, after his enlightenment, he was uncertain whether to teach. He said, this people won't want to listen to it. They're immersed in their sensuality. It'll just be a weariness and a vexation for me. And Brahma Sahampati came down and bent the knee and begged the Buddha to teach. So Brahma Sahampati is a very high-level Brahma being, a Mahabrahma, probably the Mahabrahma of this world system. And he has these interactions with the Buddha at several points in the Buddha's life. And at this time, when the Buddha passes away, he utters the verse, all beings in the world, all bodies must break up. Even the teacher, peerless in the human world, the mighty Lord and perfect Buddha, has passed away. Then Saka, ruler of the Devas, the Dewa king of Tawatingsa, uttered this verse. Impermanent are compounded things, prone to rise and fall. Having risen, they're destroyed, their passing, truest bliss. And that's in the Pali of that is a common chant at funerals. And the Venerable Anuruddha uttered this verse. No breathing in and out, just with steadfast heart, the sage who's freed from lust has passed away to peace. With mind unshaken, he endured all pain. By Nibbana, the illumined mind is free. And the Venerable Ananda uttered this verse. Terrible was the quaking, men's hairs stood on end when the all-accomplished Buddha passed away. And then all those monks who had not yet overcome their passions wept and tore their hair, raising their arms, throwing themselves down, twisting and turning, crying. All too soon the Blessed Lord has passed away. All too soon the welfare has passed away. All too soon the eye of the world has disappeared. But those monks who were free from craving endured mindfully and clearly aware, saying, all compounded things are impermanent. What is the use of this? So the monks who were, remember we had, the Buddha had declared that all these monks were already stream winners. So stream winners can still be subject to defilements of craving and grief, but an arahant is not. So the arahant, the monks who were already arahant, they just calmly abode in the situation and said, well, everything's impermanent. What do you expect? Then Anuruddha said, enough of this weeping and wailing. Has the Lord already not told you that things that are pleasant and delightful are changeable, subject to separation and becoming other? So why all this, friends? Whatever is born, become compounded, is subject to decay. It cannot be that it does not decay. The Devas, friends, are grumbling. And then there's a couple of paragraphs repetitive of what went on before about the different kinds of Devas, the ones who are not enlightened, tearing their hair and weeping and wailing, and other ones taking it calmly. Then we get into the dealing with the Buddha's remains. It begins with the monks sending a delegation to the Mallas, and the Mallas. I'm just going to go through this stuff quickly, just abbreviate it. The Mallas then come and pay homage to the Buddha with musicians and perfumes and wreaths and so on. And they do this for 7 days, and then they decide they're going to take the body out through the south gate and cremate it. But when they 8 elders of the Mallas who were selected to be pallbearers try to lift the body, it's too heavy; they can't lift it. It's impossible to lift, and they ask, "What is the meaning of this?" And Anuruddha tells them that your intention is one thing, but the intention of the Devas is another. So the Devas are blocking the lifting of the body because the Devas' intention is for them to pay homage to the Buddha with heavenly dance and song, him to be carried to the north of the city, brought out through the north gate, and through the middle of the city and out through the eastern gate to the Mala shrine of Makuta Bandhana, and there to burn the body. It's not really clear why the Devas chose a different site for the cremation, but the Mallas honor that, and they take the body to this site, and they wrap it up in the cloths and the oil and so on as prescribed for a great being. And then the story changes scene before the cremation. That it takes it recounts an incident involving the Mahakassapa, who was traveling around. He was not present at the Buddha's death. He was approaching Kusinara with a company of 500 monks, and they came across an ascetic, an Ajivaka. That's one of the other religions in India, who had a coral wreath flower that he had picked up in Kusinara, and he told the monks that the ascetic Gautam has passed away a week ago. I picked up this coral tree flower from Kusinara. And the monks who had not yet overcome their passions wept and tore their hair. The ones who had reached enlightenment said, all compounded things are impermanent. What is the use of this? So same as before. Now, sitting amongst the group was a monk named Subhada. It's not the same monk. It's the same name, but it's a different individual than the Subhada we encountered before, who was the Buddha's last disciple. This was already a monk, Subhada, who his reaction to the Buddha's death is rather troubling. He had gone forth late in life, and he said to these monks, "Enough, friends, do not weep and wail. We are well rid of this great ascetic. We were always bothered by his saying, 'It is fitting for you to do this, it is not fitting for you to do that.' Now we can do what we like and do not do what we don't like." The Mahakassapa didn't like the sound of that, and he said to the monks, "Enough of your weeping and wailing. Has not the Lord already told you what is subject to change? That those things that are pleasant and delightful are subject to change and separation." He gives the kind of the same teaching as before. He doesn't really comment directly on Subhada's statement at this point, but this is said later in another text, and in the Vinaya text, it said that this was the inspiration for Kassapa to organize the first council, because he thought already the Buddha's dead, and just within a few days we have some individuals trying to modify his teaching. They don't like. They want to kind of do their own thing. So we need to clarify the Dhamma and the Vinaya once and for all. So it's inspiration for the first council. Meanwhile, while this was going on, back in Kusinara, the Mala chiefs tried to light the funeral pyre, ignite the funeral pyre, but they were unable to do so, and because they were hindered by the Devas, and the wood would not light. And the reason for this, Anuruddha informed them, the reason for this is because Mahakassapa is coming, and the Devas want to give him a chance to pay his respects. So Mahakassapa comes, circumambulates the body, and pays homage at the Buddha's feet. And just as he does that, the funeral pyre ignites spontaneously on its own. And after it's burned down, there's a last incident in this sutta, is the arrival of several individuals, beginning with Ajatasattu, various kings and powerful Brahmins and leaders of republics, 8 altogether, coming to demand the relics, saying, and this is often thought that it became very close to a war breaking out over the Buddha's relics, but it was settled by a Brahma named Dona, who offered to divide the relics fairly into 8 portions and divide them up, so that every claimant could take away a portion, which they could take back to their kingdom and build a stupa. And these were the original stupas of the Buddha relics that later were opened up by Asoka, King Asoka. A few centuries later, he opened up these stupas and distributed the relics into 84,000 stupas. That's the traditional number. It may in reality have been less than that, but 84,000 often just means a great number. There's also another story that Ananda, who lived to be very old, I think it was 120, when he died, he was one of the last living disciples of the Buddha, and he recalled that at the Buddha's death there was almost a war over the relics, and he didn't want to cause such a commotion over his relics. So what he did when his time came to pass was to levitate over the middle of the Ganges River and burst into flame. So then the last paragraph just reports on all the different kings building their stupas in their different kingdoms. So this is the end of the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. It's the longest sutta in the entire Tipitaka, and it's very poignant and emotional story for Buddhists to read the last days of the Buddha. We can see a very human side of the Buddha in this sutta, as well as sprinkled throughout are some teachings that are not very few of the actual teachings in this sutta are unique to this sutta. They're repetitions from other places in the canon. And we see something of the characters of Ananda, Anuruddha, Mahakassapa, all important disciples of the Buddha. And the groundwork is laid for the next stage in Buddhist history, which is the convening of the first council, in which the Dhamma and the Vinaya were formalized and settled and agreed to. So I'll stop there, and we're running pretty late, but I'll try and deal with a few questions. Let's see what we got here. I'll have to scroll up. Is it still of great value today for us to make the pilgrimage to the 4 sacred sites? Yes, many people do and find it very inspiring. I have not done it, and I probably won't now at this time of life. But it's something that's still very very well worth doing. Next question. I have heard Mahayana practitioners say Theravada followers are selfish. I do not make. I don't know how this makes sense. Is it because of the Arahant aspiration? Yes, exactly. That's their critique of Theravada. Is that the goal of an is to become an Arahant and not take rebirth anymore, and then which from the Mahayana point of view, that just means basically leaving everyone else in samsara to suffer, and you just check out. Um, from the Theravada side, the critique would be that the Mahayanas seem to want to have their cake and eat it too, and they're still attached to becoming. So this is really I think the fundamental difference between Theravada and Mahayana is this Bodhisattva ideal versus the Arahant ideal. Is it a safe bet to spend all my savings for a sacred pilgrimage? Does it guarantee a heavenly rebirth? I don't know if it would be. I mean, you'd have to judge your own situation whether you want to spend all your resources on a sacred pilgrimage. Uh, and if you recall, the text is only it only guarantees a heavenly rebirth if you die in the course of the pilgrimage. Skin mites found in pimples, and if you pop them, they will die without a host. Okay, that's just a statement and not a question. I guess it's a question of whether that. I guess I can assume the question whether that's a violation of first precept. I would say not really. Okay, someone's giving me some advice about the Blue Yeti. This is the reason the sound was maybe a little off today, because I'm trying out a brand new microphone. The Blue Yeti has pattern setting 3 on the back, which should be best, plus there's a gain dial, which should be set to 3/4, and there's a volume setting on the front. Okay. I don't the pattern setting on mine seems to only have 2 positions, not 3, and I don't see where there's only the one like a button on the front. I'm not sure. I'll have to maybe talk to you, Brian, by email directly rather than get into it here. If a person, this is back to the skin mites. If a person aware of this but still pops them saying, "I don't care," would that be the breaking the precept of not killing? Well, I think it's really a borderline case. I mean, I think if you were doing that, you're not really directly killing them. You're just moving them out from under your skin, which is not, then the, which doesn't seem to me to be an unreasonable thing to do. Are the sites the Buddha relates to past lives to be taken as literal places of those events? Or is there any sense they're from alternate timelines, dimensions, or universes? That's actually a good question, because some of these past events clearly occurred in previous world systems. So the association of different places with different events in the past we may be a bit more complex than simple geographic identity. The Buddha mentions changes in places. You mentioned this harks back to impermanence. Is the Buddha mentioning it at that moment for a particular reason or in general? I believe it's kind of a combination. I think they definitely want to make a point about impermanence. They don't judge this little obscure town by the way it looks now. When it used to be a great capital city, this can bring up a sense of impermanence over long time scales. But also, there was a direct connection in this particular place with the Buddha in a previous lifetime when he had been a wheel turning monarch, a Chakravarti, who was a Mahaparusa. So it's kind of like closing a circle. He had once been a great world emperor ruling from that spot that's now just a little backwoods hick town. And here he's dying there as a Buddha. So I think it adds a lot to the emotional resonance of the event by closing that circle. Is it real that Ananda literally levitated? Well, we can't know that. This is what the story goes in the commentary. Can you levitate like Ananda? No. No, the last 2 years I couldn't levitate it even with an airline ticket. But that's changed now. How can we trust what Ananda recited from the Buddha? Ananda was said to have a perfect memory, an eidetic memory. Okay, so I think I'll take my leave there. We're after 7 now, and it's a full hour. So come up with something different for next week, and thank you all.